let's go on a journey and travel back in time 10 years to 2014. No, I'm kidding. But we are going to jump back in time 10 years, but instead it's just going to be in the scriptures. So basically, we are in Alma chapter 17 through 22 today. And in those chapters, we hop back and we're going to read about the sons of Mosiah as they go on their journey to teach the Lamanites. So this is back before Alma was chief judge and back before Alma went to teach people and met Amulek. So this is like way before them. All of that happened in 81 BC, and Mosiah's sons leaving and going and doing their missionary work happens in 91 BC. Now, I know you're like, wouldn't 91 BC be after 81 BC? Okay, but when you're counting in like BC years, I guess, that's how you want to call it, you actually count down and not up. So 81 BC in that day and age, 81 BC would be after 91. So yes, we're going to go back and read in like basically 91 about the sons of Mosiah, and we're actually going to start off reading about Ammon, and I'm sure you've heard the story before about him like slaying the arms or whatever. Well, we're going to read about that, and then we're also going to read about some of his brethren. So let's hop in. Alright, so basically I'm just going to kind of recap what happens here in chapter 17 with Ammon. So basically he goes to I think it's the land of Ishmael, but don't quote me on that. Actually, let me look. I don't know. I think it's Ishmael, but he goes to the land, and he actually ends up being captured because, you know, that was their custom in that time, was anytime they saw a Nephite to basically just capture them and take them to the king and be like, okay, you can do whatever you want with him now. So they captured him, brought him to the king, and the king was like, why should I not kill you right at this very moment, or something like that. And basically he was like, well, because I want to be your servant. And so he actually ends up starting to serve the king. And it's very interesting to me. It's just such a cool story of, like, the service that missionaries are able to do. Like, I just feel like missionaries tend to be so much more willing to do service than just, like, me in my everyday life. So it's just really cool to see, like, just how he's willing to serve, because he knew that by doing that, it would later mean that he could convert the king. And it's really cool to see what happens. So he's out, he's tending to the sheep, and I'm sure you know this part of the story where people come, like these bad guys come to scare off the sheep, and Ammon kind of stands up to them, and they try to kill him, and he ends up slaying several of them and actually cuts off some arms. And the crazy thing after this is that they actually, like, carried the arms back to the king. Like, they just carried the arms around with them. That's no big deal. And I'm like, gross. So anyway, they go back to the king, and in chapter 18, of course, the king of the Lamanites or whatever, he's like, what happened? Why are you bringing me these random arms? And so the servants that were all with Ammon basically tell them what happened. And then we're actually going to look in verse 2, 10, and 14 real quick. Verse 2 says, and when they had all testified to things which they had seen, and he had learned of the faithfulness of Ammon, him being the king, the faithfulness of Ammon in preserving his flocks, and also of his great power in contending against those who sought to slay him, he was astonished exceedingly, and he said, surely this is more than a man. Behold, is not this the great spirit who does send such great punishments upon this people because they're murderers? So basically, to give you some context, the Lamanites didn't really believe in God, but they believed in something that was like the great spirit or whatever, which is basically the same thing. So he's basically in this, he's saying, is Ammon a man, or is he like God? Because I mean, he had great power and like overthrew like a bunch of guys. So then we read verse 10 that says, and when King Lamoni heard that Ammon was preparing his horses and his chariots. Okay, so to give you some context here, while the king is talking to his servants, Ammon is just like, he just acts like nothing happened, and he goes about preparing the king's like horses and his chariot or whatever, because he was going to go see, the king was going to go see his dad. And so it says, and now when King Lamoni heard that Ammon was preparing his horses and his chariots, he was more astonished because of the faithfulness of Ammon, saying, surely there has not been any servant among all my servants that has been so faithful as this man, for even he doth remember all my commandments to execute them. Then we read in verse 14, therefore Ammon turned himself unto the king and said unto him, what wilt thou that I should do for thee, O king? And then he says it again in verse 15. He says, what desireth thou of me? So basically the king, after he hears that he's preparing the chariot, he calls Ammon and to talk to him, and Ammon's like, hey, what's up? Like, what do you need from me? What can I do for you? And he says that 2 different times. It's just really cool to see how, like, at the very forefront of his mind is, how can I help you? What can I do for you? It's not, what can you give to me? Like, he's very selfless here, and he's like, what can I do for you? And that's just a very, very cool, it's very cool to me, that's his mindset there. And so because of this, the king is just really astonished, and he actually ends up like being filled with the spirit and like all the things, and ends up starting to believe, but then he actually falls down to the ground as if he's dead, because basically it's like, it's kind of, I'm not entirely sure why it happens. I think part of it is just, I don't know how to explain it, but basically he falls to the ground as if dead because he's basically overcome by the spirit. He actually explains in chapter 19 about what had happened, but we're gonna get into 19, and we're actually gonna talk about the queen. So basically, there's everyone trying to get the queen, and she comes in and she doesn't understand what's going on, and she thinks that like Emma basically killed her husband. So she was like, guards, kill him. And they were like, no, we're not gonna touch him because he like destroyed all of those people back like when he was guarding the sheep. So we're kind of scared of him. And so the king was like, okay, fine, wimps. Let me go gather like the people. And so they actually go and start to gather people. But I want to read in verse 16 through 17 because I love this. And from what I kind of gathered, I think everyone really loves this story. It's the story of, I want to say her name is Abish or Abish. I don't know how to pronounce it. But it's so cool. Let me read this to you. It says in verse 16, and now it came to pass that they did call on the name of the Lord in their, hang on, let me give you some more context. Let's start at 15. It says, and now when the servants of the king had seen that they had fallen, they also began to cry to God, for the fear of the Lord had come upon them. Also, for it was they who had stood before the king and testified unto him concerning the great power of Ammon. And it came to pass that they did call on the name of the Lord in their might, even until they had all fallen to the earth, save it were one of the Lamanitish women, whose name was Abish. She, having been converted unto the Lord for many years on account of a remarkable vision of her father. Thus, having been converted to the Lord, and never having made it known, therefore when she saw that all the servants of Lamoni had fallen to the earth, and also her mistress the queen and the king, and Ammon lay prostrate upon the earth, she knew that it was the power of God. And supposing that this opportunity, by making known unto the people what had happened among them, that by beholding the scene it would cause them to believe in the power of God. Therefore she ran forth from house to house, making it known unto the people. So this girl has actually believed in God and has had that faith for, we don't know how long. I think, it says many years. For many years, she's had this faith, but she hasn't been able to make it public because she was so scared of what would happen. And so she's just been waiting for her time to come. And so she's just been waiting very patiently. And then this moment comes, and she's like, this is the power of God, and this is my opportunity to not only like become public with like my beliefs, but also to help convert others. And so she goes and tells people so they could come and witness this amazing thing that's happening. And it's just such a lovely story of how sometimes it can be really hard sometimes it's not even possible for us to kind of show our faith. But when we are really patient and we believe, our time will come and we can be an instrument in God's hands to convert others to the church and to gather Israel. So it's just a really cool story. After this, of course, everyone ends up waking up and everything's fine, and the king like basically tells everyone it's fine, you don't have to worry about killing Ammon. And he ends up telling them like why he fell down, yada yada, everything turns out fine. So then at this point, Ammon and Lamoni is the king's name, which they don't really reveal until later, but Ammon and Lamoni are kind of BFFs now. I mean, Lamoni is believing, and he's like, you're just this amazing prophet, like, you're awesome, dude. So Lamoni actually has Ammon come with him, and they travel to Midoni, Midoni, I don't know how you say it. They travel to a city where some of Ammon's brethren are actually in jail, and so Ammon's like, hey, can we go free them? And Lamoni was like, heck yeah, I mean, you're awesome, I would totally do anything for you or your brethren. So they go to free the brethren, and we're actually going to go to verse 15 of chapter 20. And where is it? It says, so basically they come upon Lamoni's dad. I don't actually know what his name is. But basically, his dad saw that when I was with a Nephite and was like, heck nah, you need to kill him, like, we don't like Nephites. And in verse 15, this is what Lamoni said. But Lamoni said unto him, I will not slay Ammon, neither will I return to the land of Ishmael, but I go to the land of Midian, that I may release the brethren of Ammon. For I know that they are just men and holy prophets of the true God. And I really think that took some guts, because, like, in that day and age, you, like, did not, like, disrespect your parents. Like, I mean, not that we do it a lot. I don't know. But, they really, like, it was a big deal to say no to your parents. Like, you always listen to your parents. And so, and not only that, but his dad was the king of all of the Lamanites. Like, Lamoni was just a king of, like, a portion of the land. But his dad was the king over all of the Lamanites. And so, he was a very, very powerful man. And he could totally just kill his son, like, just right there. Without a second thought. And so it really took some guts, and it's just really cool to see his beliefs like that and his faith. And so I don't know where my train of thought went. So yeah, it's very cool. But anyway, then his dad was very angry and tried to kill Ammon, but Ammon stood forth and said to him in verse 17, Behold, thou the king tried to kill his son, and Ammon said, Thou shalt not slay thy son. Nevertheless, it were better that he should fall than thee, for behold, he has repented of his sins. But if thou shouldst fall at this time in thine anger, thy soul cannot be saved. So, yada, yada, yada. Basically, they end up converting the king. Happy story, whatever. And then they go and they free the brother. So, then we get into chapter 21, and we're gonna basically switch real quick and talk about Aaron, and I want to say you pronounce his name Milwaukee, but don't quote me on that. I don't know. Loki? I don't know. But there are two of Ammon's brethren, and we're gonna switch and talk about them real quick and what happened at the same time while Ammon was teaching. This is what was happening with them. They go to a different land and they're teaching stuff, but these people really are not listening, and they actually kick them out, and that's how they actually end up in jail, is because of those wicked people. But we're going to look at verse 4 real quick, and it says, so it's talking about how, and he began to preach them in their synagogues, for they had built synagogues after the order of the Nehors. For many of the Amalekites and the Ammonites were after the order of the Nehors. And so I find that very interesting right here, because if you remember, several weeks back, probably even like a month or two ago, we read about Nehor. I think it was at the beginning of the book of Alma, right when Alma was becoming the chief judge. So really that's kind of almost at the same timeline here, but still a little bit different. So basically it's saying that they are after the order of Nehor. And if you remember, Nehor was the guy who was teaching all of this wicked things, but it was mixed with a little bit of truth, so people would believe him. And he ended up killing Gideon, and then he ended up dying. He was killed like just like it was like the law or whatever, that if you kill someone you get killed. But before that, he actually repented, and he was like, you guys, listen, everything I've said was wrong, like I take it all back. But after that, even though Nehor took back what he said, people continued to believe anyway. And so it's just very interesting to see how even here in the Lamanite land, this is probably several years after Nehor, they're still referring to it as following the order of Nehor. And it just really goes to show that your words are so powerful. Even though Nehor took back his words, people all over the country, for years later, were still believing his things, even though he said they were false. Which is crazy to me, and it just goes to show how powerful your words are. So then we're going to get into chapter 22, and we're going to, so basically, Ammon and Lamoni free Aaron and Milwaukee, and now we're going to go back to reading about Ammon, and this is when the king really becomes converted. Like, I feel like, I don't know, I think in chapter 20, he was kind of like, okay, like, whatever, but now is when we really hear about the conversion of, like, Lamoni's dad, the king. And so we're going to go to verse 15, and it says, "And it came to pass that after Aaron had expounded these things unto him, the king said, What shall I do that I may have this eternal life of which thou hast spoken? Yea, what shall I do that I may be born of God, having this wicked spirit rooted out of my breast, and receive his spirit, that I may be filled with joy, that I may not be cast off at the last day? Behold, said he, I will give up all that I possess. Yea, I will forsake my kingdom, that I may receive this joy." So yeah, Aaron, Ammon's brother, is teaching to him, and the king has a desire to learn and to change so that he can find happiness. I think he saw that in his son. He saw Lamoni was probably happier. He probably saw the light of Christ in his son, and he even saw how Lamoni was willing to stand up to his own father for his beliefs, and so that kind of planted a seed inside him. And so Aaron, after Aaron teach to him, he had a desire, and he ended up being converted. And then crazy things after that, where like the whole country gets converted. It's really crazy. But before we kind of get into that, which we won't get into it until next week, I just want to point out that this all started with Ammon and Alma being willing to stand up to a great and powerful king. Because they were willing to stand up for what they believed. It set off like a compound effect where the king ended up getting converted. And then next week we'll read about how he basically calls all of the people in his entire, like all the Lamanites, and he declares unto them that that they are basically going to be forced to allow Ammon and his brothers to teach. Like obviously they don't have to listen, like they don't have to be converted, but basically they can't put them in jail or kick them out or be mean to them. And so after that, Ammon and his brothers go and they teach, and they end up converting like a lot of people, like thousands of people, simply because Lamoni and Ammon were able to stand up to the king. And so it's just really powerful to see how like our small actions can lead to big things. And so it just makes me wonder what we can do. What small actions can we take today to start creating a compound effect? Even if you don't think it will create a compound effect, there's a chance it might. So just think about that as you go about the rest of your day, and I will see you all next week. We're going to be in Alma's chapter, I think it's 23 to 29. So I will see y'all then. Bye.